Video games are great. Reviews of video games, not so much.
Like the overabundance of water in both terrain and...
In fact, if you want to criticize gaming, the best place to look is the criticism of gaming.
I'm surprised at how much of it I remembered. That speaks to how memorable a lot of these missions are.
What does it say about video games that the surrounding criticism and theory is so shallow? To be fair, there are problems with media and journalism as a whole.
Take that conversation, have it off camera. I really would like to have a substantive conversation about.
Yeah, well, he better watch how he talks about me too.
I understand, and let's
Paris,
please have
shut up,
respect.
please, for God's sake.
But the situation is still uniquely bad with video games. One thing that will immediately strike you about game reviews is just how empty they are. Take, for example, this IGN review of the original Call of Duty. Graphically, the game is very solid. It may not have normal mapping and all of that new stuff that everyone seems so excited about, but it has style and crispness, great textures, good character models with good character faces, and some great lighting and explosions. Words like fun, good, and great are far cries from descriptives, but better writing wouldn't necessarily save this. The problem is that the reviewer has nothing to add other than random commentaries regarding mostly superficial aspects of the game. In the review, there's no higher aspiration other than sprinkling together personal preferences. It shouldn't be so surprising that the reviews online ultimately become about popularity of opinion. But for reviews so self-focused and subjective,
I didn't want to give it up. I saw myself,
I had a real...
and I loved, and I never felt like it made me feel like
I've ever seen.
there's an incredible lack of awareness. Like with this gem from the same IGN review of Call of Duty. One area that may disappoint some of you out there, it disappointed me a little, was the length.
That's what she said.
But it's not just the online entertainment platforms like IGN or GameSpot that peddle in the platitudes. Even the serious publications have some embarrassing reviews. Take this review of Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, this time from the laudable Time magazine. Levels are the most tactically open and vertically capacious they've ever been, providing ample room to flex your cyber mojo while pursuing dozens of achievements and collectibles that dovetail with your character's developmental trajectory. That is a really weird way of saying the open spaces provide a lot to do while you level up. The entire piece reads like a term paper from an insecure college freshman with access to a thesaurus. What's missing is any theory or critical thought. Because of this, there's no consistency in style or way of thinking throughout even a single review. It's not uncommon for the same review to bounce back and forth between saying absolutely nothing to making huge, sweeping statements.
Being an offshoot of modern warfare, every weapon in the arsenal feels sublime.
Sublime. Adjective. Of such excellence, grandeur, or beauty as to inspire great admiration or awe. Mozart's Sublime Piano Concertos.
Being an offshoot of modern warfare, every weapon in the arsenal feels sublime.
And it's not as if the industry isn't filled with brilliant people, but most of the intellectual firepower is directed toward the technical specifications of a game. In place of theory, we get endless discussions regarding frame rates, polygons, and pixels.
And that means God of War runs at 30 frames per second.
Runs at 60 frames per second.
Play it in 4K in 4K.
This is definitely an important aspect of the medium, but imagine a movie review that spent a couple of paragraphs talking about the lighting or the type of green used on a soundstage green screen to shoot the last Avengers movie. It's cool, but how relevant is it? If we want to know why the reviews are this way, we need to take a closer look at the media industry as a whole. The term video game journalist is simultaneously ridiculous and relevant. When we compare video game journalism in its modern state to the noble ideal of what journalism should be, the comparison is pretty silly. One blogs about physics engines in a war game, the other dodges bullets or risks capture, torture, and even decapitation to report on real wars. But this higher form of journalism is largely outshadowed by the type of journalism we mostly have.
And I'm asking you a simple question. Hold on. I'm asking you a simple question about the rate of climate change. I'm asking you a simple question about an activity.
Now the comparison makes sense. So what are some of the ideas and theories from media studies concerning journalism, which we could apply to video game journalism? Noam Chomsky is one of the most important intellectuals of our time. He began his career by revolutionizing the field of linguistics, earning the title the father of modern linguistics. But if his work overturning an entire science wasn't enough, he also wrote a critique of modern media. In Manufacturing Consent, the political economy of the mass media, his influential book written with Edward S. Herman, Chomsky shows how even the free press of Western societies become system supportive and propaganda machines. The book focuses on 5 major factors or filters which deeply influence major media platforms. Let's review 3 of those and see how they work with modern journalism, and specifically video game journalism. The first and maybe the most important factor is that media outlets are companies, or in most cases, a smaller piece of a much larger company. Fox News is part of the Fox Corporation. IGN is a subsidiary of J2 Global, and GameSpot is a subsidiary of CNET Networks, a subsidiary of CBS Interactive, which is a subsidiary of CBS Entertainment Group, which is one of 4 major units of Viacom CBS. What do all of these companies have in common? The profit motive. Corporations will naturally gravitate to less critical, less thoughtful, less provoking content in order to minimize their risk, keeping the overall profit potential healthy and the customer happy. And customer here is the key, because with major media companies, it's not the viewers who are the customers. Advertisers are the customers. Viewers are the product. Which brings us to the second major filter, advertising. In order to remain profitable, media corporations adopt the views and prejudices of advertisers. Think of NFL owner Dan Snyder, who just as recently as a few years ago said he would never change the name of his DC team. The moment the NFL's biggest customers, their advertisers, raised enough concern, Snyder immediately relented.
First off, happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
It's not always this obvious, but the fact remains that the more entangled your interests are with someone, the more your attitudes begin to reflect theirs. And that brings us to the third major filter, sourcing. How do media reporters get their news? With whom do reporters spend most of their professional and personal lives with? A White House reporter relies on his sources inside the White House to have anything to report on. If this source is unhappy with how the reporter handles the information, he'll either not reveal any more information, or he'll just choose another reporter to reveal the next scoop to. The reporters who get the important news on the powerful tend to be those who will more closely reflect the attitudes of those powerful people. This is where most people misunderstand Chomsky's point. Many think Chomsky is saying that there is a powerful elite that consciously controls the media. This is the material every great conspiracy results in. There's ultimately this Illuminati society of masterminds pulling all the strings. Sure, there are certainly examples of the most cynical power players having their hand in the propaganda machine, but Chomsky's claim is the overwhelming majority is not that. It's the exact opposite. It's systematic and unconscious. There's a great filtering that happens from childhood all the way to adulthood, which rewards and surfaces those that share a certain belief system. In an interview with journalist Andrew Marr, Chomsky sums this up for Marr, who makes the common misread of Chomsky's theory.
How can you know that I'm self-censoring? How can you know that journalists are self-censoring?
I'm sure you believe everything you're saying. But what I'm saying is if you believe something different, you wouldn't be sitting where you're sitting.
Apply the theory to video game journalism, and the current state of video game criticism makes a lot of sense. Much fuss is made about the inflated scores of video games. If you were to look at any given video game review, it almost certainly has a higher average score than any other review of any other medium. Even mediocre games seem to get largely positive reviews. Why? It would be a mistake to think there's some grand conspiracy between all reviewers and publishers, a closed-door pact to review their products favorably. Sure, there might be some cases of this, but mostly there are systematic factors which play a much more important role. Alana Pierce, a former IGN reviewer, published a video on YouTube where she unknowingly argues Chomsky's points.
Try not to get too mad at me. Of course, I am on the inside. I only have an inside perspective. Back before I worked in the games industry, I was convinced game reviews were paid off too. And then I worked in the industry and I realized how dumb that was. And it is really, really just that people have different opinions.
And those which have opinions which reflect more closely with those of the advertisers and publishers naturally end up being the ones who rise higher in the company.
But it doesn't mean that there are no games that fall below 5. Games come out every single day that would be considered bad or unplayable or broken. But IGN isn't going to waste most of its time reviewing all of those games because A, it's impossible. But B, audiences don't generally even care about those games. So yes, loads and loads and loads of bad games exist, you just don't see them reviewed because nobody's even going to pay attention to those reviews.
But the most revealing point she makes is in her disagreement with the industry.
But yes, my number one criticism of games media is that I think that a lot of journalists write things for their Twitter followers who also work in the industry more so than they do for the people who read the website.
Again, this isn't automatically cynical or conspiratorial. It's a natural result of systematic factors, not necessarily personal ones. So the next time you see a really bad, totally empty review from IGN, take solace in knowing it's not bad because that person is bought off, but instead, it's bad because they actually believe what they're saying. That's better, right?